Former Florence County Sheriff Kenney Boone pleaded guilty this morning to embezzlement and misconduct in office.
I had been an employee of the Florence County Sheriff's Office since 1987 when I was 21 years old.
Boone is accused of using both county and federal funds allocated to the Florence County Sheriff's Office for his own personal use.
This is Sheriff Kenney Boone. Crime is actually going down in Florence County.
Are you sure about that?
Court documents show Boone purchased bicycle equipment, groceries, coolers, electronics, and clothing from various vendors.
The man that you saw in all those video clips was former Florence County, South Carolina Sheriff Kenney Boone, but his real name is William Boone. And if you think that story and that opener was the only part about this story that is both bizarre and frightening, then you don't know Kenney Boone, because Kenney Boone is by far one of the most psychotic sheriffs I have ever seen in my entire life. William Boone was a law enforcement officer for more than 3 decades, and throughout his stint as a law enforcement officer, there were people coming forward saying that this man was corrupt and a thief. And when he became sheriff of Florence County in South Carolina, there were citizens accusing his deputies of harassing them and trying to extort money. Now you might be saying, these are only claims. The problem with that counterposition is that Kenney Boone himself was convicted of embezzlement and unprofessional conduct that began with his interaction with the Florence County Finance Director, Kevin Yoakum. I'm gonna let you hear these recordings, and keep in mind, not only are these recordings real, but they were featured on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. So in these recordings, you're going to hear Kenney Boone appear to threaten Kevin Yoakum in regards to a hotel stay that Florence County didn't want to pay for because there were some suspicions that Kenney Boone wasn't exactly the most trustworthy of people. And that video clip that you saw towards the beginning of the video, where it was discovered that Kenney Boone was using state funds, taxpayer funds, for his own uses, you can begin to see why Kevin Yoakum might have been a little bit suspicious. And Kenney Boone did not like that. How much did he not like that? Well, hear it for yourself.
Kevin, this is Kenney Boone. You call me back immediately. If I don't get a call back, I'm going to send a deputy around your house. Or wherever you're going to find your ass, call me now. Kevin, Kenney Boone again. I don't know what your deal is, but your nose business barn's been going with me for years, and now all of a sudden you want to question things that I do, you little nerdy, intelligent bastard. I tell you what, you call me back, because I'm going to be, hell's coming with me. If I was in Florence, I would meet you personally, but I'm telling you, IT, listen, you ain't seen hell yet, because I'm coming back, and I'm going to take IT away from all y'all and do whatever I need to do. I'm telling you, payback's going to be hell. I promise you. Thank you.
Well, that happened.
The question that you might be asking is, did Kevin Yoakum actually go to the authorities? And the answer to that question is, of course he did. But that's precisely the problem, and let me show you what I mean by that. Now, Kevin Yoakum went to the South Carolina Attorney General's office, and even to this very day, the sitting Attorney General for South Carolina was Alan Wilson, who is the son, or stepson, of U.S. Congressman Joe Wilson, or the same guy who shouted out to Obama, "You lie." Yeah, that guy. So he reached out to the Attorney General's office and he presented these recordings. And keep in mind that Kenney Boone would go on to plead guilty to stealing money from taxpayers, and then he would go on to be arrested for domestic violence and all kinds of other silly stuff. So this was the South Carolina Attorney General's opportunity to stop a clearly psychotic sheriff before he became a problem. Because mind you, again, this was before the embezzlement, the domestic violence, the other charges. This was the South Carolina Attorney General's office's first opportunity to intervene and put a stop to this man. Do you know what they said? Well, they said something that you may find hard to believe. Robert Kittle is the communications director of the South Carolina Attorney General's office, and he confirmed that the office actually received the recordings and the complaints, but the Deputy Attorney General, Heather Weiss, gave a recommendation to not charge Boone, which is odd because not only are these recordings clearly threats that are actionable and credible, but it is very, very interesting that Kenney Boone is known to do political commercials for certain politicians, and the Attorney General's position is an elected position, meaning people vote on it. And don't you find it a little bit interesting that Kenney Boone endorsed Alan Wilson for Attorney General? Now, Alan Wilson, of course, claimed that there was no direct involvement in the decision to not prosecute or even charge Kenney Boone, but some might say that maybe he had some incentives to not charge Kenney Boone. And so Robert Kittle, who is the communications director, this piece of work, he said that while the voicemails were unprofessional and rude, it would be difficult to prove in court that a crime was committed. Now, you might be thinking, how is this not a threat? Because if I were to call any law enforcement officer and leave that voicemail, I'm pretty sure a judge would find a way to convict me. But for some reason, when you put on a badge in South Carolina or you're a government employee, the law simply does not apply to you. Because there's no way you look at Kenney Boone's behavior and tell me this is not the behavior of someone who is used to getting away with things, because the things that he did, he didn't even try to hide. He left that voicemail, and he knew that voicemail is a voicemail system, meaning that it records. He was a sheriff. He's not dumb. He had to have known that. So why would he leave not one but two voicemails as if nothing would happen to him? And guess what? What do you know? Nothing happened to him. Robert Kittle, who is the communications director of the Attorney General's office, is clearly not that intelligent, because if you listen to those recordings, those are clearly threats. And any reasonable judge would convict Kenney Boone for threatening people. But at the same time, I'm actually gonna give Robert Kittle a little bit of a pass here, because I actually talked with him on the phone several times. And while I do find him to be a very, very untrustworthy person, there is one thing that he said that does make sense. He said, quote, "Mr. McNeil," and that's my name, Dion McNeil, "you yourself have written article after article after article about how bad the judges are in South Carolina. Why do you suddenly expect these judges, these same judges who you say aren't worth a grain of salt, to fix things?" And so when I actually brought up the fact that several people across the country have told me that South Carolina is the Chicago of the South in terms of corruption, he responded with, well, maybe that's because of all the sheriffs and police chiefs that we keep putting behind bars. Do you understand how insane it is that I, as a card-carrying journalist, was told this by a state attorney general's office? Let that sink in for a moment. When Kenney Boone was busted for stealing things in office, and when he was arrested and taken to a correctional facility and then in front of a judge, he was originally convicted and given 5 years in prison. But then later on, a judge by the name of William McKinnon decided to just suspend the sentence after only serving 18 months behind bars if Boone were to pay back the money he owes. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that your sentence would have been suspended if you were guilty of even half of the things that Kenney Boone was? Do you honestly believe you would walk away with a slap on the wrist like he did? And what makes it worse is that before he was convicted, he was placed on probation from the embezzlement trial after only serving just 18 months behind bars. Then we find out that while he was on trial for embezzlement and stealing money, Kenney Boone on one night decided to take a baseball bat, and during a heated exchange with his wife about paying for his legal fees and other issues, according to police reports, he assaulted his wife with that bat and then took that same baseball bat and struck the family cat with it. So this man not only was stealing things, but according to police reports, started beating up his wife and an innocent animal with a baseball bat. And so when the police arrived, Kenney Boone started threatening them with the baseball bat. And yet somehow, some way, Kenney Boone does not end up dead, unlike some other people in high-profile police encounters. This man pled guilty to stealing money, taxpayer money, on a state and federal level. He was threatening people. He then took a baseball bat and started assaulting his wife and an innocent animal. And yet this man has been given probation, slaps on the wrist, and even when there was an opportunity to intervene and stop this man, the South Carolina Attorney General's office did absolutely nothing. And so when he was arrested and booked due to the domestic violence situation, and after he posted a $10,000 bond, Kenney Boone found himself in trouble yet again. A circuit court judge named Paul Birch revoked the bond of Kenney Boone because as a condition for the bond and his release due to the domestic violence situation, he was also placed on a no contact order with his wife. And somehow, some way, Kenney Boone found the way to come near his wife. And in fact, the same Heather Weiss, who did absolutely nothing and recommended no charges when Kenney Boone was threatening people, turns around and says that it appears that Boone wants to play by his own rules. Well, the reason why, Miss Weiss, is because your office, much like most of the government offices in South Carolina, is so corrupt, so up the rear end of police officers, senators, representatives, judges, and lawyers, to the point where they do play by their own rules because they know it takes an act of God to get your sorry self to do something. Now, I do understand that given my reputation of always questioning cops and lawyers, judges, and people like Heather Weiss and her sad excuse for a boss, Attorney General Alan Wilson, but this story was less about police corruption and more about pointing out the fact that the reason why there is so much police corruption is because citizens cannot trust the checks and balances that are supposed to keep the cops honest. U.S. states have their respective attorney general's offices that are supposed to keep public servants like police officers, sheriffs, and police chiefs honest for the sake of public trust. Because, much like judges, if people don't trust your cops, then you might as well not have a society. This story demonstrates why I have repeatedly criticized police officers, because if you came from the state that I came from, what the hell would you say? And to Kevin Yoakum, if you're watching this video, I want to say thank you for trying to fight government corruption, and I see that you've moved on to bigger and better things, and honestly, man, I don't blame you. Get the hell out of South Carolina government, because as you've seen, and as your story that got thrust into the national spotlight showed, that state is hopelessly corrupt. But what do I know? I'm just the devil in the details.